Hi. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Aurora, and I am here to talk about how to become a replaceable designer. And you may be thinking that that's great that you're putting 30 minutes of your day into learning how to be out of a job. That's obviously not the kind of talk that this is, but um, first going to talk to you about a few things about me, and then we'll get to it. Um, one work related thing today that is kind of relevant to this talk is that I'm a systems designer, which means I'm a product designer who gets to work on design system things, gets to work on colors, on buttons, on patterns. And I get to do that along with a team of 15 other lovely people from a company called Github. We're all the design systems team. And this talk is a result of some of the struggles and ideas that I've been experiencing lately doing this job. And then a few other things that are not as relevant, perhaps, or not work related. I like cute things. I think everyone does. I like pets. I don't have a pet, but I take pictures with other people's pets. And I also like going on vacation. These are pictures of me going on vacation, wearing cute things, looking like a pet, maybe. Um, I like going on vacation, and it feels really good to be able to say that out loud without feeling like I'm lazy or without feeling like I'm slacking. Because I like going on vacation, but I'm also a 32-year-old millennial who entered the workforce at a time that was perhaps not the best. When it came to work-life balance. At the time in 2012, unemployment was at 55% of the population under 25 in Spain, my country. And I was one of those people who were unemployed, and I was looking for a job like crazy. And I ended up landing an internship that I was making 300 euros a month for 2 years. I was an intern for 2 years, and I loved it because I was learning a lot, and I felt like it was a great opportunity since it was so hard to get a job at the time. And so, because of kind of as an inheritance of the work culture of the 90s and this kind of situation of recession, there was a lot of questionable advice going around, like PowerPoint is great, or fake it till you make it, or make yourself irreplaceable. What does that even mean? Make it so that at work they cannot fire you, they cannot get rid of you. And so I took that to heart because that's what I do. And I was working long hours and evenings and weekends, and in some situations that maybe came in from vacation to turn in some work with a flash drive because that was a thing. And I thought I was doing a great job because I was constantly available, and in the end I felt like a very like efficient and irreplaceable employee. But the truth is, by working so hard, I wasn't actually generating as much value as I thought, because if I would have decided to just flip the table, I don't like design, I want to become a carpenter or a florist, and I would have walked out the door without any notice, nobody would have been able to continue the work I had been doing because I was hoarding the knowledge and I was hoarding the work. And luckily today, things are a little bit different. I have a job that I like and that values me. And thankfully, I think that work culture, at least work culture in technology, has evolved for the better, even though there's still a lot of work to do. I do seek that work-life balance, and not just as something that I need and I value as a personal thing, but also because now I work in systems. Now I don't work on uh, like single like design campaigns, for example, like when I first started. And as a systems designer, it is so important to make sure that you are not part of the system that you are creating, that you will be the designer, you will operate the system. But if you are part of the equation, then there's a lot of work to do there. So this is what this talk is about today, is a work in progress, is some of the ideas that I'm thinking about into how to make myself replaceable so that I can create great systems, so that I can contribute to great systems and also go on vacation because that's what I love, as I said. Um, The main three areas that I've been focusing on are principles, kind of what are the things that we can establish to make decisions that can make systems reliable, documentation. I don't need to explain why documentation is important. Is the oldest, pretty much only way to kind of pass on a legacy, and collaboration, because if we do all of what we're going to learn about today by ourselves, then we're not really fixing the problem. So let's get to principles. When I talk about principles in this particular case, I don't mean specific product design principles. Product design principles are usually informed by user needs, by company mission, by company strategy. And those are principles that design systems teams also have to align with and also have to follow. But as systems designers, there is something that is inherent to our mission, what we do. We aim to be a reliable foundation for product development to be able to build and deliver the products that they do. And so how can we make sure that our systems are solid and reliable and can continue on regardless of how many people go on sabbatical or how many people decide to just take a break? Excuse the exclamations. There's a lot of explanations in this talk. First, make it easy. Make design easy. Easy to learn, easy to produce, easy to reproduce, and easy to carry on. Imagine someone new joins the team, and they need to learn the design patterns of the design system. How are you going to do it? And I like to think about this to the extreme. I like to think about simplicity to the extreme, because simple design is not just considered good design because it is aesthetic. It's also considered good design because it solves a problem in a simple way. Take this square here. Just with one square, this one simple shape, you can probably create a lot of components in a lot of UI just based on this. Is just one shape, one stroke, and one color, and one border radius. And with this square, you can pretty much build a big chunk of the Instagram UI. If you take a look at the screens, you can see squares being repeated everywhere, and it's kind of not only a way to achieve harmony, it makes it look very simple, and it's also based on a premise that is so such a part of the personality of Instagram since the beginning of the product. Pictures were a square, and I don't know if this was intentional. I don't know if there's any Instagram designers here today, but this is a good exercise to do in order to think how simple can a product be. And I think if I wanted to start learning how to design for Instagram, I would feel a little bit more confident than maybe other products out there. And this is I know that not all of us are Instagram. Not all of us can afford such simplicity, but it's this principle of simplicity of easy patterns that we can extrapolate to any kind of design. It's more of a North Star to have present than to needing to redesign your entire product. And I want to mention also the work of Dieter Rams. He is a big advocate for simplicity in design. He is one of the biggest influence for product design nowadays. And one of his 10 principles of good design is that good design is long-lasting. And I think this is the principle that we should all aim to follow in our design systems work. There's an example of the work that Dieter Ram has done that I learned from my design mentor that has always stayed with me, because I was able to see in a collection of physical products, which is something that is very far away from what I do today, and it's hard for me to grasp. How does one even design for brown, for example? Um, even then, Dieterams was able to establish a pattern, a simple pattern that other people could reproduce. And in this case, I'm talking, it's not a square, it's a rectangle. He kept reusing the 16:9 ratio rectangle, and not just in brown, but then you can also see it in the image in the Vitsoi shelves. It's the rectangle again, and it's just a principle that travels with him wherever he goes. And this is all aspirational and not easy to apply to our day-to-day, but again, it's a North Star. It's something that can drive us to simplify as much as we can. And yes, if you look at today's brown products, it's possible that they haven't always followed all of the principles and ideas that Dieter was introducing. I don't think that was because he wasn't around, or because he didn't want to tell them, or because he didn't document it. I think because companies change and missions change, and that's also part of the reality and part of the future to account for when working in design systems. And other principles to keep in mind is to invest in systems inside of systems, which is a very systems heavy way to say that you have to make time for the smaller conversations. As product designers, joining design systems team, it feels weird sometimes to have conversations about the shade of a color of a button or the border radius of a component. But these are the conversations that are actually inherent to the type of work that we do in design systems. I've created a very simple oversimplified overview of what a color system could look like, with accent colors and feedback colors and foundations. And if you have worked in a color system, you know two things. One is that yellow is stupid, and the other one is that it's really difficult to create an extensive and exhaustive color system, because it's a very complicated subject. There's so many factors that influence how we model color, how we perceive color. So it's a never-ending work. But any given starting color system will have a foundation. We have the accent colors and feedback colors, and then some of those colors will be applied to text, and some of those colors will be applied to borders or backgrounds. But then when you start really zooming in into the project, then you start having these smaller questions. Do we need to use opacity? Do we not need to use opacity? If we do we need a scale? Does that scale have powers of 5 or powers of 8? What units are we using? And these are the conversations that the product designer inside of me makes me feel uncomfortable about, because I'm so used to thinking about the bigger picture and not get nitpicky. But that's what you do in design system. It is okay to get nitpicky, because if you miss out on these conversations, you're actually creating a lot of design debt, because these conversations are the loose ends. These smaller projects are the loose ends that we can leave behind if we don't pay attention to them. So these are just two examples of principles to establish that have us thinking about scalability or timelessness. It's all the same. And then, of course, any principles that we establish, they have to be documented, because otherwise, we've said it, I've heard it so many times, if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. And in this case, I'm not talking about documentation as a final product or as a living style guide that lets us know how to use the system, but it's more like, what is behind a project? What is behind the work that you've been doing? If someone wanted to continue doing your work because you're going on vacation, how would they do that? And so these are some ideas that I've been having about this, because a few weeks ago, I received a Slack notification from from a colleague of mine who was asking, I was wondering about the process behind this color system that I've been working on. And I panicked because I have been taking notes and I had been documenting things here and there, but I hadn't made the time to document the process. So this is what I sent him. It's just a scribble with some milestones and some light bulbs, it seems like. And it seems like this was enough for the time because, well, he's really smart as well. Um, but it had me thinking, how could I have done this better? And so some things that I've been thinking a lot about is designing the open. It just so happens that Brad Frost wrote an article back in 2013. I believe he was coining this term or this sentence, but I'm not sure. And he was basically explaining the benefits of designing things in the open, designing publicly. And I think this is a really interesting idea because this is how you share the knowledge in a passive way. This is how you share the knowledge without, even if you don't have the time to write or you're not very good at writing, like I am not. I've been experimenting a lot with video and with audio. I'm also lucky enough to have my own office. So like noise is not usually a problem for me. And I started a YouTube channel. And so I wanted to film myself just while work to get used to being on camera. And I ended up also documenting my decisions and speaking out loud because I'm an only child, so I have no problem talking to myself. I'm going to drink water for a second. And we are in a fantastic time to experiment with different formats. I've been experimenting with Loom as well because it's such a good way for asynchronous collaboration or to just simply record what's on your mind. Audio, if you're not comfortable with the camera, it's another option. And then if not, pen and paper. I repeat this because for someone like me who doesn't draw very well, pen and paper has always been kind of in the background. I never thought it was an option, but actually forcing myself to use pen and paper more, I have unlocked my ability to collect my thoughts a lot faster and a lot more understandably for myself. So I encourage everyone to use pen and paper more, even if they have to take screenshots or photos of them. And sorry to flash you there, but you gotta tidy up your Figma files. I know that not all the time we have time. Sometimes it gets chaotic. I understand. I also have very messy Figma files. But if you take something home, just take this flashy slide with you, tidy up your Figma files, and experiment with your own conventions or with your team conventions. Like you can label versions with memorable names, use post-its, and don't delete anything. Archive your files, but all the explorations that you leave behind a project are such gold for the upcoming new team members that don't delete. And then share your vision. Again, those explorations are gold. I know that sometimes as designers, we have to constantly switch between 3 different lanes. We know what we are able to ship. We know kind of what we can ship at the moment, but we also know what we would like to see the future be for a component or for a pattern or for an interface. Make sure that you document that. Make sure that you take some time as little as possible to do some future explorations because you have the opportunity to influence the future of the system without becoming a dependency. And so this is kind of like a positive thought that I've been thinking a lot about lately. And as I mentioned earlier, don't do it by yourself. You got to do it as a team because otherwise we're creating the same problem. So let's talk about collaboration. I like the idea of the super brain because I've been thinking a lot about how we as systems designers, we also have responsibility to offer support to the product design team, to the site design team, so that they can know how to use the system, so that they can know where to find resources, or simply to help them with design feedback. And sometimes I have a hard time telling the difference between the feedback that I create on my own and the feedback that is something that we as a team believe because it's part of our principles. It sometimes those are not the same thing, because you only work with the information you have. But because now we have principles and we have been documenting them, we're able to create a super brain. And you can actually generate the work in groups and in pairs. Again, this may sound super obvious for other people, but for me, this is something that I used to do in high school and I dreaded it. And now we're in such a great time in which can actually do it from the comfort of our room, which is something that I appreciate a lot. And in working in groups and pairing up, you are generating knowledge and you're generating work that belongs to that super brain. And that is how we create, how we make the best decisions. And just wanted to add a quick note about automation. I don't have a lot of experience with this, but I do have experience currently working with someone who is good at design and good at developing and is able to create tools to solve problems that maybe we find ourselves as designers. I don't code particularly, so I find myself solving problems over and over again or doing tasks that are very manual. So it's a great opportunity to collaborate with your team to create tools so that those problems can be automated or like solved automatically from here on out. And not everyone has a team of designers and developers or a specific design systems team. But keeping in mind that with technology, there is nothing you can't do. You can always find opportunities to collaborate with, if you're a designer, with developers in your organization, with someone in your team who is also passionate about systems. And there is nothing that makes you the most replaceable, lets you go on vacation as an automated process. So this is something to keep in mind. And then let it go. I was trying to find a Frozen GIF because I really like Frozen, but I didn't find one that was big enough. So you have to just, imagine the song. It's easy. But this is something that it was really hard for me to let go of my own work because I always viewed it as my own work. And there is ways so that we can detach ourselves from that work. And one thing that I learned recently is, for example, an exercise of design ping pong, in which more than one person in the team can allocate 1 to 2 hours of their time to try and solve the same problem as you, and then see how each individual person can create a completely different solution. And then with that, you are decentralizing the solution process. It's kind of like what we used to say that we don't like design by committee. I kind of feel like now I'm okay with design by committee because that we have proof and we have seen how much better we work as a team when we collaborate on design. And then last but not least, conventions. It's important to understand that we have a super brain of many smaller brains that are from different backgrounds, different professions, and that is what makes teams great. And in those teams, what we need is just a little bit of structure, just a common language, so that we can operate under the same structure, but be creative in our own way. Create glossaries and naming conventions. This is a little bit going back to what I mentioned earlier about getting nitpicky. Maybe it's not, it doesn't feel important to disambiguate how you name colors or how you name different properties. But for example, me as a designer who doesn't code or CSS for me is not as top of mind maybe as other of my teammates. For me, a background is an element. It's almost a physical, an abstract part of a design, and it can look many different ways. However, for a front-end engineer, for example, a background is a property, and it doesn't mean that we don't understand each other's concept, but it just means that whenever we say one name, we are probably thinking about different things. So if you can, making the time to establish conventions and make sure that they are documented somewhere, it's another way of making sure that everyone can take your spot and continue with your work. And that is about it in terms of what I wanted to go in depth in those three areas. In the end, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it is our mission as systems designers to remove ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we are becoming replaceable, as I'm using the word in this talk. It means that we are we are creating a work that will last and that will outlive our tenure, or will outlive our sabbatical, or whatever you want to call it. And so, yes, and these are kind of the gist of the three areas that we've been talking about. Create system-specific principles. Make sure that those are like simple and easy for other designers to apply, and then document it. Embrace the idea of legacy. Legacy is a good thing. And then feed the super brain with collaboration and with documentation, because in the end, we are designers. Design is a very likable job, and we are lucky and privileged that we get to do this job every day. But at the same time, we are here to enjoy our time and to discover new hobbies. And there's not anything with any feeling of accomplishment than to move on to another job or move on to a different activity with a sense of accomplishment of having done a good job. So just enjoy, have fun with systems, and think about your next break. Thank you.